All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, the first shockwave of this round of free agency in Major League Baseball was cast last night when the news broke that starting pitcher Jacob deGrom would be signing with the Texas Rangers. It took $185 million over the next 5 years with a 6 year option for the Rangers, which could bring the contract to $222 million in order for Texas to pry away DeGrom from the New York Mets. But the Rangers got their guy. Now, make no mistake about it, when healthy, DeGrom is one of the best pitchers in baseball, but that is a big if. DeGrom has only made 26 starts over the last 2 years. And honestly, obviously, things were different in 2020 due to COVID, but you got to go back to 2019 to find the last time that DeGrom was able to make at least 30 starts in a season. Now, DeGrom is 34 years of age. He brings with him to North Texas plenty of accolades, which includes being a two-time National League Cy Young Award winner, as well as having one of the most electric fastballs in the game. Now, the Rangers came into this offseason knowing that they needed to bolster their pitching as they were 12th in the American League last season in team earned run average at 4.22. Now, the signing of DeGrom means that the Rangers will have committed nearly $100 million between him, Corey Seager, and Marcus Simeon for next season. And of course, Seager and Simeon also got long term deals last offseason when the Texas Rangers went on a spending spree. Now, the Rangers rather, were desperate for pitching, and this is what led to them overpaying for DeGrom. And I say that because you look at it, the Mets were going to pay DeGrom, and the reports are roughly that the Mets were offering anywhere like somewhere in the 3 year range for about $120 million. So it still worked out to about $40 million a year for DeGrom, but the years were the difference. I didn't see the Mets going past 4 years with DeGrom, given his injury history more than his age. And then on top of that, the Rangers went a step further and gave him 5 years with the 6 year option. So you look at it, and of course, you ask yourselves, did DeGrom really want to stay with the Mets? And I think outwardly, he and his camp said all of the right things, but honestly, inwardly, I feel, my personal opinion, that DeGrom was looking for an out. And I say that because I think the alarm bell went off for Jacob DeGrom last offseason when he saw the Mets go out there and overpay for Max Scherzer. But the shoe was on the other foot at the time because the Mets were the more desperate team at the time to go out there and get a pitcher. And that's what led to them signing Max Scherzer. And I think from Jacob DeGrom's standpoint, he saw that and said, well, wait a minute. If Max Scherzer can get that, what about me? He had the opt out clause in his contract and he exercised it. And for me, in my opinion, I think that DeGrom is probably going to go now, short term at least, from being one of the most beloved players in franchise history for the Mets to now being one of the most vilified because, the fan base there for the Mets, they're very passionate about their team and they really support their team. And obviously, it's been well over 30 years since the Mets have won the World Series, but nonetheless, this team really supports this franchise and the fans, rather. And it's a scenario where if you're a Met fan, you probably thought, well, we're starting to get around this thing because Steve Cohen has purchased a team and he in a short time he has really shown that he's trying to change the culture, do things differently, spend money, think of more about the fans because he himself, is a fan. And it's a scenario where Cohen, I feel like money wise, was not going to be outbid for DeGrom, but it came down to the years. And I think DeGrom just saw this as an opportunity to go out there and get the top dollar. And with that said, he did it. But I'm really not sure if he really wanted to stay with the Mets long term. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, DeGrom, if he had stayed with the Mets and finished his career with the Mets, I think he could have been viewed as the second best pitcher in the franchise's history next to Tom Seaver. And that's saying a lot. The Mets have had some solid pitchers over the years, but they just have not had anybody, spend their entire career with the organization. The only star players that have spent their entire careers with the Mets, you got to go back to Ed Kranepool and then, of course, David Wright. And unfortunately for Wright, the second part of his career was not the same after the back injuries. CJ LaChapelle, how are you doing, my good friend? Um, you're saying that DeGrom is out of the NL East, which is a win for the Braves. Short term, yes, but I'm going to get to the long term effects of that in a minute. So stand by. But for the Rangers, this is a big off season because we saw them go out there and shake up their front office. Chris Young is running things now. Also, we saw the Rangers go out there and get Bruce Bochy out of retirement. And, for their sake, they're hopeful that he can, show some of the magic that he did in helping the San Francisco Giants win 3 World Series championships last decade. We got to wait and see. But of course, the question is going to be, are the Rangers now contenders in the American League West? I think the Rangers will definitely take a step up. For the division title, I'm not sure because you look at Houston, and I'm not going to count them out. Obviously, the Astros still have to take care of some business of their own this offseason, but already we've seen Houston go out there and sign Jose Abreu, which is a big move. I think that's a move, for me, in my opinion, that has flown under the radar somewhat. But then also, you look at the emergence of the Seattle Mariners last season. Can they build off of their trip to the postseason? We got to wait and see. I think the Rangers will be an improved team. I still think there is an option there for them to get to the postseason now as a wild card. And if you're one of these teams around Major League Baseball who did not make the playoffs last year, but you sat back and watched the postseason and you saw the success, at least in the National League, that the wild cards had, seeing both the Phillies and Padres get to the NLCS, and obviously the Phillies getting to the World Series. If you're a team, you can say, hey, you know what? Let's just try to find a way to get to the playoffs, and anything can happen. So, the Rangers do have an opportunity from that standpoint, but I still look at this team as being very top heavy. You got DeGrom now. You've also got Simeon, who underachieved for a good portion of the season, and you got Corey Seager. So the jury's still going to be out on this Rangers team. On the flip side, and this is where you come into play, CJ, what is next for the Mets? And the Mets are still going to go out there and spend money. And we've seen it already this offseason. I mean, both as soon as the World Series ended, we saw the Mets go out there and give Edwin Diaz the bag. So it's a scenario where they're still going to go out there and spend money. It's one of those where you still got Justin Verlander in play. And I think now, if you're Justin Verlander, you have to be happy with what you just saw from Jacob deGrom, because now, in deGrom leaving the Mets, that puts another big market team on your radar, because there were rumors about, and there still are rumors about, the Dodgers being interested in Justin Verlander. Obviously, the Astros want to retain Justin Verlander. There's rumors about the New York Yankees potentially being interested in Justin Verlander as well. Now you put the Mets into that mix. The Mets are also interested in Carlos Rodon, and I know that they have had some Zoom meetings, at least one, with Rodon and his camp. So obviously that heightens things for them, and obviously with the money that the Mets are probably going to spend on deGrom, they can probably go in several different directions with this. Do you go out there and get a Carlos Rodon? Do you maybe now try to keep Brandon Nimmo? Because I really thought that the Mets were going to focus more on bringing back deGrom and not bringing back Brandon Nimmo, just due to the fact that I really thought the Mets weren't going to try to match the money and the years that somebody else was going to be offering Brandon Nimmo. So that definitely changes things right there to see what they're going to do. CJ, you're saying I have had nothing but respect for Bochy since he showed a lot of respect for Bobby Cox after his Giants beat us in the NLDS in 22. I do remember that series. I do remember that postseason, and that was a very interesting postseason. And I'll tell you a real quick tidbit. When I was writing my blog post at the time, from a couple of years before that, I want to say 2009, I talked about nobody wanting to face the San Francisco Giants if they got into the postseason due to the fact of the young pitching that they had at the time. Of course, Matt Cain and Tim Lincecum. And remember back in 2009, the Giants had Randy Johnson in their rotation, and Randy Johnson got his 300th win in a Giants uniform, and he's probably going to be the last 300 game winner for a very long time. And I said nobody was going to want to face that Giants team if they got into the postseason. Giants got in 2010. It was a farewell song for Bobby Cox with the Braves. And I remember that series vividly. I remember how it ended, at Turner Field in Atlanta. And, the Giant organization went out there and showed Bobby Cox some love. And I'm sure he probably still remembers it to this day. And then, of course, after that, they upset the two-time defending nationally champion Philadelphia Phillies in the NLCS, and I'm sure CJ, you didn't shed a tear over that. And then they beat the aforementioned Rangers, and of course, the rest is history. But you think about right now for the Mets from their standpoint. Obviously, they know what's ahead of them because they got to find a way to keep up with the Braves and the Phillies in this National League East. So I think the Mets are going to be okay. It's a sting to their egos. It's a sting to the egos of their fan base. But it's one of those I think with their brain trust and Billy Epler and Buck Showalter and of course Steve Cohen, they're going to find a way to get creative this offseason. They're still going to go out there and spend money. But if you're a Mets fan, you got to say, you know what? For once, you got some adults in the front office. It's not a Wilpons scenario where the Wilpons go out there and spend money foolishly over the years. The Mets, if the Mets are still owned by the Wilpons right now, first of all, they wouldn't have signed Scherzer last year. They darn sure would not have re-signed Diaz. And then on top of that, they probably would have matched Texas's offer with deGrom. And again, my biggest thing with deGrom, and CJ, please feel free to chime in here. It's a scenario where when he's on the mound and he's healthy, he's one of the best pitchers in the game, but it's one of those where can you consistently rely on him to give you 30 innings? I mean, 30 starts a season. Can you rely on him to consistently give you 25 quality starts a season? We got to wait and see on that. That's going to be the big thing. Can DeGrom stay healthy? And that is going to come down to whether or not this was worth it for the Texas Rangers and if the New York Mets are going to look wrong or right and not matching Texas's offer and letting them walk out the door. Now, with that said, is DeGrom going to be the only superstar player to leave the Big Apple this offseason? And I say that because I'm talking about Aaron Judge. And reports are that the Yankees have offered Judge $300 million for 8 years. I guarantee you, Judge and his people are probably contemplating that offer, but they're also looking to see if they can get more on the open market. And the reports are it's coming down to the Yankees and the San Francisco Giants. So I said before, it would not surprise me to see somebody give Judge 10 years, maybe $350 million. And if the Giants did it, it would be in the mode of the Texas Rangers because when you are an organization that's looking to turn things around, you have to go out there and do a little bit more financially in order to lure players to come play for you. That's what the Rangers did last year in signing Corey Seager and Marcus Simeon. That's what they did this year in signing Jacob deGrom. And if the Giants really want Aaron Judge, that's what they're going to have to do. At the end of the day, it's a business. And very rarely are you going to see players give a team the quote unquote hometown discount unless that guy really wants to be there. It's a numbers game. So I know that people are going to get upset at people, for switching teams at the end of the day. But bottom line is money talks and everything else walks. So for the Mets, they can't sit over here and, to quote the nature boy Ric Flair, and cry over spilled milk. What they got to do, they got to go out there and reassemble the team. And they've got to go out there and find a way to now bolster their starting rotation, see who they're going to bring back, and see who they're not going to resign as well, in the hopes of not just getting to the postseason once again for 2023, but also making some noise when they get there. So this is probably a shock to, not probably, it definitely was a shock to the system of the Mets and their fan base. I think that short term, it's a slap in, not really a slap in the face, but it's a shock to the Mets. But let's see what the Mets are going to do to counter this move, and let's see how they can bolster their team heading into the off and into spring training. Right now, I can't even say the balance of power has shifted in the National League East, but definitely one star player has left. So let's see what's next for the Mets, as they can no longer rely on number 48 going out there every fifth day. And honestly, with that said, not trying to sound like a broken record, but at times they really couldn't rely on number 48 going out there every fifth day. But nonetheless, let's see what the Mets can do now to bolster their rotation now that Jacob deGrom is a Texas Ranger. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off. And just before I sign off, I want to thank CJ as always. Thank you for chiming in. Thank you for the commentary. And like I said, I'd be back on here pretty soon with some baseball stuff. The hot stove is starting to heat up, and just prior to the winter meetings, and I'm sure we'll probably have more to talk about during and after the winter meetings. So definitely keep me on your radar. And once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, saying take care and have a wonderful day. And thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube.